You have likely either read or heard of the benefits of jumping for your bones. So today, I'm really excited to be able to share a paper that just came out in the Journal of Sports Medicine Science 2024, which was a systematic review and meta-analysis specifically on jumping and whether or not jumping was site-specific, a question so many people ask me. Hi, I'm Margaret Martin, Familiar Guide. I'm a registered physical therapist, certified strength and conditioning specialist. So let's get on with what were their findings. So when somebody does a systematic review and meta-analysis, they're taking data from lots of different studies. So these individuals, they actually found 18 trials that were valid to write about. And the number of individuals inclusive of all those trials was just over 666, I believe. And what was so fascinating was that they found that the jumping was very beneficial, but very specifically to the femoral neck. Now, you probably know if you've had a DEXA, they often talk about the femoral neck, and that's the neck in the femur and not up here in your neck. And so that makes a lot of sense because when we jump and the impact of jumping, it travels up through the legs and obviously will impact the femoral neck. So those were really positive results. And they were both positive in younger adults and older adults. Now, you also notice if you look carefully at your DEXA, they do talk about the femoral neck, but they'll often talk about the subtrochanteric area or the total hip score. Now, they found that jumping did not impact total hip score or subtrochanteric area in older adults, but it did impact it in younger adults. So another motivation to start early and so that you can build all the parts of your bone equally. Now, sadly, which is what I've often said to my clients, jumping does not impact your lumbar spine. So there's not enough transmission of forces to stimulate the spine. But I wouldn't discourage you from jumping because jumping is free. You can do it anywhere. You don't require any equipment. So it's really a practical thing to incorporate in your day. Now, how many jumps, you say? Well, I'll tell you in just a moment. But first, I want to say a couple of cautionary things about jumping. There's two cautionary things before you start putting in your jumps. One is what is the status of the health of your pelvic floor? So many women don't know if they have a partial prolapse, a moderate prolapse. These usually come, they're in stages 1, 2, 3, 4. And so I would highly recommend if you have not had a pelvic floor assessment that you do that either with a pelvic floor physical therapist or your gynecologist. But certainly if you start jumping and you're noticing that you're leaking, you're noticing that you're feeling something, at the vagina that you didn't feel before, that might be an indicator that you have a prolapse. Or doesn't mean you won't ever be able to jump. It just means that your pelvic floor needs a little bit of love and attention and maybe some of its own exercises before you can start jumping on a regular basis. The second thing I really want you to pay attention to is how you jump. Because if you start jumping, but your form is not healthy, and when I say that, it means how you land, how your feet are relative to your knees or your knees relative to your feet. And so often that's an indicator of the strength in your hips. If your jumping form is not good, over time, that will negatively impact your knees. After reviewing this video, I realized there were a few other considerations worthy of mention. Your current overall health, your balance and stability, and importantly, the strength of your bones. If your history includes fragility fractures, other health complications, poor physical conditioning, jumping is probably not the wise place to start. You should progressively challenge your body and bones under the guidance of a trained healthcare professional familiar with safely building bones. Always best to play it safe. Now we'll discuss the number and frequency of jumps that led to improvements in these studies. So, as promised, how many jumps? Well, with these studies, they found that if you did 50 jumps a day, at least 4 times a week, you would get positive results. The early animal studies showed that if you break up those 50 jumps, you would get even better results. So I encourage you, and it's so much easier to do, is pick something routine in your day and build your jumps around it. Now, I had an aunt who was a bit extreme, but whenever she came out of the toilet, she would do 5 jumps. And so she lived a very long and healthy life, and she never broke a bone. So if that works for you, that could be something that you start to incorporate. Much better coming out of the toilet than going in so you don't leak. So if you're going to consider incorporating jumps in your life, then I encourage you to do so, but just be cautious that all systems are in check and that you make sure you're keeping your pelvic floor and your knees healthy along the way. Thanks for joining me today, and I wish you a lovely day.